And make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Are you driven, ambitious, and ready to earn? WESN, the content capital, is expanding, and we're looking for dynamic media sales executives to join our team. Sell powerful advertising solutions across television, digital, and social media platforms, and help brands tell their story. If you have strong communication skills, a passion for sales, and the drive to succeed, join WESN today. Send your CV to marketing@wsncc.com or WhatsApp 68-61662 and start building your future.
Money is something we all deal with, but how many of us truly understand it? What if you could make better decisions with your money? Decisions that secure your future, protect your family, and bring you peace of mind. I'm Darren Jacobs, and I'm here to help you make sense of your dollars. Welcome to Dollars and Cents, the show that breaks down the financial world in ways that matter to you. No jargon, no confusion, just real conversations about money, your money. So join me every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on WESN for Dollars and Cents.
WESN.
Good morning, this is Talking About the WSN Connected Capital Show. Michael Small here once again with you. And there's a lot to discuss today. Politics has continued to be disappointing, but now, instead of being disappointed by the government, I'm being disappointed by the opposition. And the fact of the matter is we need both to be stable, and yet, well, you see what's recently happened. But before I get into that, there's something that I want to make mention of. It's a sensitive topic, but on some level, I guess I'm just going to say what I think I have to say and want to say, and if you don't like it, you could call in and disagree, but don't just call in to say you don't like it. There was a very controversial situation going on in Cambridge a couple of weeks ago with one Jason Ade. Now, the unfortunate reality is the situation has been obfuscated by the politics. That I am not necessarily convinced Cambridge hired him only for politics, but based on what I have read, he was not the only minority candidate under consideration for that spot. And unfortunately, given the reasonable accusations, I'm not saying all the accusations are reasonable, one could make a case that he might have been the least qualified candidate that they were looking at. I believe they were looking at 4 candidates, 2 were female. I think they may have all been black, or at least 2 of them might have been black. And all 3 of the other candidates were apparently more senior to him. Now, there have been a lot of talk about, this is what's starting to bother me. The politics in the situation is morphing around the case, which should not have been, yes, it's a controversial case, but it should not have been a controversial case to this extent, right? It's unfortunate the times that we live in, because on one hand, you have one side which went to extreme, and on the other hand, you have the other side which is attempting to push back in an extreme manner, at least at times. Enough times that both sides are basically pointing fingers at each other, trying to say that the other one is the one going too far. Now, the New York Times said it this way. Jason Arde was an early career scholar and underqualified by the school's own standards for the professorship, given his modest publication record and the fact he had not supervised a PhD student through to the completion of their project. Right, 2 were women of color and 3 were all more senior scholars than him. This is the other individuals considered for the position. Now what's happening is, so when you read that, things like that, claims like that are not necessarily being debated. What's being debated is what is plagiarism and how maybe plagiarism is being used as an attack by racists. The problem is these are terms and theories and I guess you could say principles by which up until now academia has attempted to use as the standard by which to judge people of all color. What's happening now is, by making it a big deal, those who see this as an example of affirmative action excess run the risk of already taking it too far and coming across as though they're attacking him personally. They're attacking him just because he's black. Meanwhile, the other side is now looking, maybe unintentionally, not realizing they're eroding the standards upon which objectivity is based. On some level, there are some whack jobs that want to say objectivity is racist. Math is racist. Merits and standards are racist. Just because someone is on the left, you actually have to drill down and see, all right, you might be on that side of the line, but there are a lot of degrees on that side of the line. Some are yahoos, many are not. Same thing on the right. You can't just say one side is yahoos and think, oh, well, I figured it out. No. In part because if that's all you do, that kind of overgeneralization and simplification, well, there's no wonder that divisions could never be brought back together. Because what's happening now is this debate, you see, the defenders of Mr. Ade can't actually defend the specific claims against him. And the fact of the matter is, it just seems as though this whole situation got out of control. Cambridge thought he was a compelling candidate to be a professor. Mr. Ade himself probably oversold himself, and he just did not have the prerequisite foundation. And the problem is, he is supposed to then be someone to help mold and shape the minds of advanced level students moving forward. He himself is potentially not fully finished being molded. And it seems as though Cambridge allowed themselves, I don't necessarily think this was an affirmative action hire per se, but they allowed themselves to be enamored with such a good candidate, which some people have criticized them as treating Jason Ade as a mascot up until this whole thing happened. And the sad reality is there are a lot of different situations that calls for criticisms in this one case. There was a reporter that was investigating his academic qualifications, and the police were called and they spoke to the reporter and treated it as though he was harassing him. Well, here's the problem. If you can't investigate anybody, then how is society supposed to function? Because you have one side saying, well, they're using plagiarism as a way to attack a race they don't like. But then again, just because it's someone of a different race, does that make it racist? they haven't necessarily, and maybe it's there, they haven't necessarily shown us what was the evidence of racist motivation. And I say all that to say that a case like this then goes, first of all, it should not have led to the outcome that it has led to. But that is in no small part to both Cambridge and Mr. Ade perhaps going too far with his appointment and not showing a bit of responsibility, particularly in Cambridge's case. Because on some level, if he thinks he's qualified enough, is he going to turn down the appointment? And if this was a case where they wanted, because Cambridge has apparently faced criticism for not having enough black faculty and staff, there were other non-white candidates in the process. When you listen to his life story, he was autistic. He didn't speak until the age of 18. Now, I'm not entirely sure if I believe all of that. But at the same time, I'm not taking a horrors to dig down to find out if it was true or not. That's neither here nor there to me. What matters to me is the process technically failed all the way until when the last correction, the last stop to course correct this situation, which unfortunately, usually, when you reach at the end, that's the most extreme. Because now everyone's committed to this. And if it falls apart, the consequences will be extreme and tragic. And when you think about it, in similar cases, they have led in similar cases to the subject of the situation taking their own life. Because how do you move on from something like this? And things like this, I understand. Meritocracy to me is not something that should just be swept aside for the sake of quotas or for the sake of appearances, especially when you're supposed to be teaching other people or there are other important responsibilities. Like you can't downgrade standards for firefighters. You then run the risks of endangering other people's lives. But what this does is also, because now it's political, now it's like COVID. Now, at some point, there are aspects of the narrative on this situation that I don't really care for on either side. Because now they're more concerned about winning the debate as opposed to what went wrong and, more importantly, how to prevent it, because you don't want to see another Jason Ade in a similar situation take his own life. And the assumption is, oh, well, my perspective is the only correct one. But the fallout on academia could potentially be catastrophic, depending on who wins this pseudo-debate of ideological purity. That really and truly is the least important part of it. But that's what's going to be played out in the media, and that's what's going to get into prominence. And these kinds of things matter to us in the Caribbean in a way, because it will inform us on how we view the wider academic world and to some degree how we view academia. Now, we don't have an issue of having tertiary institutions that are, well, let me not go there. We don't have the same issues that Cambridge does. But that doesn't mean that we can't have similar issues of having an over-index of the main racial majority of the region. But not just that, what about having perhaps maybe too many of our academics from too few countries? Because things like this will eventually challenge, ironically, diversity of perspectives. And diversity of perspectives can come from many sources. Usually in politics, people who want to champion diversity limit it to gender and race. They don't necessarily consider things like national background, economic background, regional background, geographic background, etc., etc. Or even academic background, because of course, if you are a paleontologist and I am a medical doctor, our backgrounds are different. So our perspectives are different. If you are an economist and I'm a lawyer, how we view government would be through those two different lenses. If you work in the foreign service, you're thinking about how things affect our international relations. If I work in local government, I'm thinking about how everything affects the people on the ground within the country. I don't care about what's going on outside the country. So right now, a lot of the debate in the press is about who was either persecuting due to bigotry or who was covering up plagiarism due to affirmative action. And then what will get lost in the shuffle was the fact that Cambridge probably took the least qualified candidate because he had the better story. And the fact of the matter is they probably were looking to exploit his story to help give them better press. And by taking their eye off the ball, which is academics and meritocracy and objectivity, they made a mistake. They made a mistake that, yes, technically, the subject opted into, but the fallout led to the tragic outcome that it led to. And when you have weird situations like that, that people are not necessarily going to want to understand, because to them, it has to be either bigotry or affirmative action. There can't be nuance in the discussion and multiple layers and multiple issues at once. It has to be oversimplified, because the narrative that they want to sell you to sell papers to get clicks online can't be too complex, because Lord only knows that the general public can't handle complex. This is one of the things that I think a lot of the public needs to understand. Most of the people whose narratives and stories and claims that I dislike, part of the reason why I dislike them is not because they're from one side of the political line or the other. It's because they give oversimplified arguments on the premise that you, the people, are too stupid to understand complex problems. I don't think the public is too stupid. I think the public is too distracted, or does not have the incentive, or is not motivated to put in the work. But they can, because at the end of the day, everybody's origin point is the society that they live in. So we have to be careful that our own academia is not necessarily interrupted by these types of ideological debates. Because right now, there's a situation going on with, well, The Guardian has an interesting article. It's, I guess, the ongoing work of the International Seabed Authority and the debate over what the regulation should be with regards to underwater mining. There is some consideration that there are mineral deposits in the Caribbean region underwater. And there are concerns by a lot of local stakeholders that, and these concerns, one could argue, are not unreasonable. Given the history of mining on land, they don't want to see that in the sea, because once you start wealth extracting, corporations, the profits incentive is very good at being efficient and ensuring that you're not wasteful when trying to achieve whatever economic objective, like extracting resources from the ground. And by doing it the most efficient way possible, it's the least wasteful, it's the most beneficial to society in that respect. But of course, every now and then you have elements of the private sector that might want to kind of do unethical things or irresponsible things, because it doesn't matter to them if the ecology of an area that they're drilling in is ruined. It's the profit incentive. So you need to have some sort of framework in order to govern that. And the government, the Minister of Planning, he's come out to say that, look, we will look at what the data really tells us. But one of the things with regards to data is it's one thing to have data. If you don't know what you're looking at, then the effectiveness of it isn't really there. And when you have complex issues like deep sea mining, and you need to consider all of the variables in order to try to get the best resolution, you need those academic perspectives to look at the data from various vantage points, from various backgrounds, in order to try to cover all your bases. And you also need people who are accustomed to meritocracy. Because if you're going to go off of someone whose meritocracy is not that important, it's the appearances, then the decisions will be made based on the appearances, and they won't always be made the best decisions. Because what will happen is, when politics says, or when politics favors resource extraction, it'll be done to excess. When politics favors ecological preservation, then we won't have access to the resources. And instead of trying to find the right way to do it, the balanced way to do it, we'll just be flip-flopping between the extremes. That's essentially what happened with oil. You know, you have the Democrats, they want to kind of limit the oil. Then Trump gets into power, he wants to expand the oil. Now, the real question is, has anyone considered, is this the best way to do it? Not whether it should be done or not, but the politics only debates whether it should be done or not, because they are not going deeper in the complexities of the issues. The reality of something like this, because again, stakeholders in the region think that this can lead to mineral wealth for certain countries, depending. I believe they're looking at things along the volcanic activity in the region, the hydrothermal vent system along the mid-Atlantic ridge. It can be associated with mineral-rich sulfide deposits containing metals such as copper, zinc, gold, and silver. Now, I don't know if it's going to have enough to make it economically feasible, to be honest, right? But the concerns are that it will be done without restraint. But one of the things that I've found is that we tend to debate things stuck in our experiences, and our experiences are based on technology of the past. The abortion debate is stuck in 1984. Medical technology is now 32 years updated, more advanced, and some of the talking points on the abortion debate are, as far as I'm aware, obsolete. At 22 weeks, you could take the fetus out of the mother, and it's still viable. It doesn't have to die. Give it up for adoption. But the narrative is still on, well, abort or don't abort, not you could get a premature baby safely out for whatever reason and then give that baby up for adoption. It has not advanced to that talking point. It's still stuck in whatever the rhetoric and the emotional arguments were way back when. One of the interesting things, another example of technology moving on, although this is not necessarily fully, how to say this, of a direct comparison. Before fossil fuels, we cut trees to burn wood. What has happened now is, in part due to the use of fossil fuels, in part due to economic activity, there are more woodlands now in the world. The catches, these are not necessarily natural rainforests and ecosystems, but a lot of it is going to be planted trees meant for timber yards, basically meant to farm wood from whatever, pine trees, whatever type of trees planted. These aren't necessarily full ecologies. So there's a question on how beneficial they are to the environment. But the fact remains that without the need to chop down wood, because we have fossil fuels, yes, we have put ourselves into a more complex situation. But the fact of the matter is, you see where technology says, all right, we have solved one ecological problem. We might have caused another, but the point is technology can progress and can seek out different forms of doing things, new ways, new tools, new ideas, new paths that can potentially solve the problems of the old ways. I mean, at the end of the day, we already know how to go, I believe, almost carbon zero, and that's nuclear. But we are caught up in the debate on the safety of nuclear, except that debate is stuck, I believe, in the 1980s or 70s, because a lot of the nuclear power plants that had accidents are that old. I don't think there are that many power plants based on new technologies in 2026. To then say, what could it actually do? How small could it scale for small countries like us? And how efficient it is. There are some who claim that nuclear waste is not to the degree that it used to be, that the amount is far more manageable now, far easier to dispose of, to contain, to prevent from contaminating any sort of groundwater or soil. Because technology advanced, but the debate has not advanced with it. Now, in some cases, the reason for that is, well, it's because the people who make solar panels and wind turbines don't want you to talk about nuclear power plants. And once you start to realize things like that will occur, then you need to understand that even when people are trying to do the right thing, they're still looking out for number one. And that's why when it comes to things like extracting mineral wealth, you can't just listen to a company's slogans. We are ABC Mining Company, and we are here to do it responsibly. No, it has to be determined by objective measures. What are the possibilities to go into deep sea mining, underwater ground, right? Which could impact the ecology of the entire area, all of the marine life, which will then impact fisheries, which could then impact food security for at least some of the islands. How do we do this? What's the best way? What are the risk factors? What are reasonable risks? How do we mitigate those risks? And what are potential technologies we should be looking to try to develop to further mitigate or maybe even eliminate those risks? As opposed to allowing what happens now, because it's funny, everybody says the other side is not the side of science. Everybody says so. When the fact of the matter is, even if one side is more rooted in science than the other, they do a very poor job of actually engaging responsibly, because it's turned into political arguments, who's right and who's wrong, not what's right so that we could have a better situation. And other situations like this will come up in our society, where we will look at new things that we could potentially exploit, but that will come with risks, that will come with negative consequences. We are a case study of that. Our oil and gas resources, we did not do enough to guard ourselves from the negative consequences of Dutch disease. And now we are ill prepared for what comes next. And now we have successive governments. I complain about this about the PNM. I could complain about this about the UNC. Successive governments whose seemingly only economic plan is to try to get another oil and or gas windfall. That's it. That's all they got. Because no one has a clue how to do diversity. That's the truth. Because instead of looking at objective measures, we have way too many ideologically pure individuals who are not here to find solutions, but who are here to sell themselves or their party in order to win the next election. And winning an election and governing well are not always the same thing. And instead of measuring the success of a government on objective measures, far too often it's emotional arguments. Which is ironic because one could say that the current government, that's one of the things they say. People are being emotional for no reason, being unreasonable, We're trying to put things in place, give us a chance. All right, that's fine. But you exploited the hell out of that to ensure that your predecessor was not voted back in. And on some level, there are members of academia that speak in public, utilizing their positions as a platform of authority on subject matter. And the things that they have to say, at times, are either extremely biased or they are so unsophisticated, any layman could come up with the talking point or the argument that they're trying to make. Which then begs the question, why are you even speaking to the media? But more importantly, when you have that happen, what you don't have, because they're taking up space, they're sucking up air, you don't have objective, skilled academics who are giving a true, insightful analysis of the situation and offering up proper technical solutions. And more importantly, because their modus operandi, their measuring stick, is not the politics of the day. It's not what does the government look like, what race they are, or where they live, right? Or what nice slogans they have, right? Or what color suits they wear. If they were true academics, then it's all based on objective truth that could be measured, that could be quantified in some form or another. And then by doing so, then it's not about nothing, not about race, not about none of that. And more importantly, how they would then therefore move, what they would then therefore say, would naturally push back against all of this nonsense that we see going on now in our politics with regards to race. Because what they would be doing is basically saying, I don't have time for none of that nonsense. And people who want to engage in that nonsense are not worthy of my time. They are not worthy of anyone that wants to seriously consider how to solve the country's problems. And the big one is the economy and how to best prepare it for the future, how to best position it for the future. What does that even mean? Because we say diversification, but that is almost as meaningless as when we talk about Tobago autonomy because it is not properly defined. Just random diversification without a plan is not necessarily going to be the most effective way to help the economy. But no one has a plan. No one can define things. No one wants to put in the effort. That's too hard. Why do you expect politicians to actually work? The current government doesn't even do post-cabinet press conferences most of the time. But no, everything gets caught up into politics. Abroad and at home, politics of the day, whether it's racial identity politics or conservative versus liberal politics, or in our case, UNC versus PNM politics, that is far more important than just trying to do a good, objectively good job for the sake of society, to show true skill, to show true leadership, to show true perseverance. The most perseverance we see, the people with grit, we don't see grit, at least in part because of what we see in the public sphere. When it comes to standing your ground on technical matters in order to ensure that the right decisions are made. No, it's political grit. Shameless people who get called out in lies, but then they wave it off and move on, because that's what it means to have thick skin. Having thick skin means I could mislead you, get caught, and then disregard when people are pointing out my flaws. And move on proud, because if I act as though I did nothing wrong, there will be enough people that think I did nothing wrong. We already live in a society where meritocracy is not a thing. And if you want to say that's not a big deal, then stop complaining about the inefficiencies of the public sector. Then stop complaining about how ineffective governments and politicians are. Then stop complaining about how the private sector business, like your auto dealership or whatever retailer you went to or whatever service provider, mistreats you. If meritocracy is not important to you, if meritocracy you think is a negative thing, stop complaining when you get bad service from whatever sector. Stop complaining if you get passed up for promotion. Stop complaining if your career doesn't reach the heights you think you deserve, if meritocracy is not a thing. And I think on some level that is the root core of it, to be honest. We allow ourselves to be distracted from the things that matter. So when you have important things coming up, like how do you determine the regulations for underwater mining? What do you want out of the discussions, the debates being held within the International Seabed Authority? Because we are so distracted with all these other nonsense, ridiculous things that we are being distracted with, it's done for a purpose, so that whatever the ridiculous agendas are will not get any reasonable pushback. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, I'll get into the San Fernando East situation, which has completely taken me by surprise. I have no idea why this is even necessary, and it is highly disappointing. Stay tuned. This is Talking Point on WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity, from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Your health matters, and the answers you need are just one conversation away. What's Up Doc is back for an exciting season 5, and we're bringing to you Trinidad and Tobago's leading medical professionals to discuss the issues that affect you and your family. From prevention and treatment to wellness and the latest medical technology. Get trusted advice, ask your questions, and stay informed. We also have an exciting new addition to the What's Up Doc family, our very own fitness instructor, Elena, who will provide easy, practical exercises you can implement in your daily routine. So don't miss What's Up Doc, Season 5, only on WESN, the content capital. Because when it comes to your health, knowledge is the best medicine.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
In this day of stay at home and work from home, home has never meant more than it does today. Whether you're looking to buy, rent or build your new home, now is the time to get going. Gittins & Gittins Real Estate Agents are here to take you to that place of your dreams. Let us take you home. We'll help you find that rental to rest along the way or journey with you to find your home destination. Investors and commercial enterprises too, call us and we'll walk the distance to place your business in just the right location. Owners, leave the headaches to us. We'll find your tenants or buyers while you stay at home. We'll even manage your property at your bidding. Anything real estate, come home to Gittins & Gittins Real Estate. Call us at 760-3280 or 747-1220 or visit us at 16 Fifth Street in Woodbrook.
And we're back here and talking about the WSN Connect Capital Show. Michael Small with you once again. As promised, I can't ignore this situation, and it's not that I want to. It's rather, and let me be frank, there's a lot that I wish did not happen. There's a lot. I have said this before. I would much rather that things be boring. And I will have very little to say, and then my bosses will be like, you know, your show doesn't have a point. Let's take it off the air. Because things are too boring, there's nothing interesting for me to say, and I must, you know, there's nothing to do. Because when things are interesting, things are going badly. Now, most of the time is committed to analyzing what government does because they make policy. That's how it was under the PNM. I had criticisms for the UNC opposition, but at some point, I couldn't keep going with that. They weren't enacting policy, they weren't making policy, they were the opposition. Now the roles are reversed. So for the most part, I had criticisms for the PNM opposition from almost the very beginning. Literally the day after, I will never forget Stuart Young's incredible poor choice of follow-up message the following day with him at a beach, seemingly so unperturbed by the incredible defeat that the party suffered under his stewardship. Things like that. We started the ball rolling on the opposition from the beginning. But of course, as time went on, the significance of criticizing them in their role as the opposition waned. Because the government was in charge, the UNC were in charge, so they are enacting policy. That's more important. But in the previous administration, I believe I said this to PNM supporters. Don't think it's a good thing that the UNC was an ineffective opposition. I said things to that effect back then. And I said things to this effect, I believe, recently. When I say recently, post-election. Don't think that a weak opposition PNM is a good thing for all of the UNC supporters. I still believe that to be true. In fact, I actually told someone yesterday that people need to understand, PNM supporters need to understand, the UNC government doing badly doesn't necessarily help you. Because what's happening is, I believe both political parties are literally looking at each other, thinking, you're imploding, I don't have to do nothing. Now, I think on some level, the PNM got caught up with that. I think the PNM might be getting caught up with that, not understanding, yes, the country might be vexed with the government, but in the long run, it doesn't help you to take that shortcut. Because in part, that's what the government did. That's what the UNC did. So in the election, they basically relied, it might not have been intentional, on the fact that the people wanted to vote out the PNM. Now, the problem is, I don't know if they realize that sentiment is not going to persist forever. But what's going on in San Fernando, I think, is now a symptom of what happens when you start to think that the battle is already started to be won, because the other side is slowly but surely, or quickly, undermining their own credibility, at least by your opinion, right? Because I'm sure UNC supporters might not share that opinion, but hey, PNM people might have that opinion, and you might start to think, we don't have to worry about them, that'll sort itself out. So now what does that mean? And this is why it's not a good thing. If PNM people think that the UNC government is imploding and that they don't really have to put much work in to defeat them in the next election, now their focus is going to go from improving the party, regaining credibility with the public, and preparing themselves to strengthen their foundation to go into the next election. They're not going to do that, because the government is going to be voted out, right? Perception. What they will do is tell themselves, we are a jockey for position. Who want to be political leader, who want to be AG, who want to be head of government business, who want to have position when they win the next election. This is not talking to anybody else. This is my personal speculation on the psychology of what's going on. And I'll say this, I don't think that Brian Manning is at the center of such psychology, of that way of thinking, but I do think that it's affecting the situation, whether he is of that mind or not. Because I've been told, and the belief is, Mr. Manning is a well-intentioned individual. Unfortunately, like what I have said about sitting government ministers, he might not necessarily have the most experience to know what to do in this situation. And he has put himself, can't really blame anybody for the end result, or at least the current stage that we find ourselves in. He has put himself in a very bad position, and I can't fault the party for basically looking at him funny, saying, whoa, this is not good. Because at a time when the government one could debate whether it's slow or not, but building momentum on losing trust and confidence of the public, the last thing you want to do is interrupt your opponent's mistake with one of your own. And this is not me saying I want the PNM to win. I am just pointing out what I think to be bad strategy. It's like I said, I don't know why the UNC wants certain people of the PNM to be removed from the PNM, because if I was them, I would want those people to stay right there and continue undermining the PNM. But this is different. This is something that was so unnecessary. And why it matters now to the general public is, if things like this could happen within the party, what might happen if you are in government and there are differences of opinion? What what might the internal power struggle, how far is it going to go? And what could it possibly affect? And these are some of the things, not just the fact that it's embarrassing. The PNM executive isn't just concerned about the embarrassment. This is the quote from the chairman, Marvin Gonzalez. You are engaging on a very dangerous path that isn't good for the party's interests. Because it makes the party not just look embarrassing, it makes the party look bad. It makes the party look incapable, inept, unstable. And here's the problem for us. It goes back to what Mr. Sanfano said before and recently. Who do I vote for? Who's there with a mindset that represents my mindset? Who's there to display things like objectivity, good sense, common sense, strategic thinking, innovation, problem solving, solutions first, with enough compassion for the people, but understanding the demands of macro strategy? Who is there to do that? Who is there to not just do eat of food and friends and family and kickbacks and that nonsense? Who is there as the candidate, as the government, as the party for that, for people like him to vote for? Because on one hand, you have a government which is doing what it's doing. You could debate whether it's doing it well or not, but the real thing is, not everybody likes it. And then on the other hand, the supposed government in waiting still cannot get its act together. That's the thing. The whole issue post-election was that the PNM, it was almost like if they didn't know what to do now that they lost the election. They were still acting as though they had the moral high ground of being in office. And they then thought, well, we're in opposition now, so we could just switch gears and criticize the government for everything. It's like, no. They got elected in April. You cannot blame them for the state of schools in September. Now, this September would have been the time for Naya and Gatsby Dolly to come out and say, it's not so easy, isn't it? Now would be the time when she might be able to start to think about bringing it up. But not then, not months after the election. That's not reasonable. Regardless of what the practical reality is, the public isn't going to be ready for that. So that was the issue with the PNM and opposition. They were too busy, it seemed as though, jockeying for internal position, not understanding your party's reputation is in shambles and you need to do everything you can to fix it. And at that time, the government's reputation was solid, golden. It was seemingly invincible because we were in the honeymoon period. And now, yes, the government's reputation is not as solid, but that doesn't give you license to think that you could compete while looking like a mess. And the situation between Mr. Manning, Amplia, Sanfano East, and the constituency executive, it's not necessarily that big of a deal, but at the same time, you have to look at where it's happening, what it means symbolically for a party that heavily depends on the symbolism of the past to give themselves legitimacy. One of the things that annoyed me to no end, but this could be just personal preference, was the sheer amount of times that the PNM would always bring up the however many years under PNM stewardship, however many years the PNM did this, the PNM did that, the history of the nation and the PNM guided country. That's nice. It's like, listen, I understand that people do want to rate Dr. Eric Williams highly and Mr. Manning highly. This is the most important thing, though. This is the most important thing, right? For those that think that the past prime ministers of PNM governments were great prime ministers, the most important thing is not to debate whether those men were great men or not, whether they did a good job or not. The most important thing is to point out that those men were not there. They're not here anymore. Members of Dr. Rowley's administration, made sure that Mr. Manning was no longer around. Made sure of it. So the PNM bringing up the past, look at the past, look at our history, look at our blah, 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 blah. Yes, some of it is pertinent, but a lot of it is that was then, they were then, you are now, this is now. Your job performance does not have anything to do with them. Your ability has nothing to do with them. This is San Fernando East. Mr. Manning was brought back because it is the seat of his father, the original Mr. Manning. Because in a way, it is an attempt to tap into that legacy, to tap into the nostalgia, to tap into the perceptions of Patrick Manning being a good politician and a good prime minister. Whether you agree with that or not is irrelevant. The fact of the matter is that was the strategy. And now, what is going on? I'll be honest. My impression was that the party executive is not blameless, the constituency executive is not blameless in this situation. And I have been told, Brian Manning, he's too inexperienced and he's making mistakes. So to me, this situation is a complex one. I don't necessarily know who's in the right or wrong initially. But what I do know is, to be fair to the party executive, the chairman said, hey, we have ways to deal with this. Do not deal with this out in the public in this manner. And some might say, he's just trying to hide the dirty laundry. No, that also means follow proper procedure. Because if you cannot follow your party's procedure, how are you going to actually operate in a government and follow government procedure? Because those procedures now, at least in some cases, are required by law. Those are the kind of things that I criticized then Minister of Finance Com Imbit for. Not following proper procedure with regards to the Auditor General and how audits are supposed to be conducted. Those are technically kind of things that the PNM got criticism for the Brent Thomas affair for. Because proper procedure to get him from Barbados was not followed, therefore, one could argue was a kidnapping. Because proper procedure wasn't followed for the Paria tragedy. Because LMCS, regardless of whether they were culpable under OSHA or not, it was their responsibility to enact a rescue effort, and they were blocked by a mid-level manager that was probably underqualified for his position. And for the most part was put there because he was either cheaper than his predecessor or cheaper than the person that was there before the restructuring, or he was politically reliable. That's how it comes across. Because that's how governments operate. And we lament the fact that they do these things, but then we actually do nothing about it. So, here's the sad part. It has been pointed out to me that there are other family members of the Mannings, the two mayors, that are also stirring up trouble. Is it for good reason? Is it for no reason? Right? More importantly, we might now see the end, the final end of an era. One could argue that up until now, we had at least a Pandey in the UNC or a Manning in the PNM. Obviously, their fathers have been long removed. But Michaela Pandey was kicked out of the UNC, and now Brian Manning might be kicked out of the PNM, but not because they necessarily wanted to. They might be forced to. And if he and his cousins are removed, well, that's it. That's the end of the legacy. And now San Fernando East, maybe this is a good thing. Maybe they won't necessarily be burdened about clinging on to the past, about the wishful thinkings of if only we had Patrick Manning back. Because unfortunately, and I do think this is, whether you liked him or not, it was very unfortunate when he passed. one could argue it was too soon on a personal level, not on a political level, right? He's already gone from politics, and his retirement was cut short. And here was a man that I believe did work hard. Whether you agreed with his decisions or not is a different matter. Because there's room for disagreement there. There's definitely room for disagreement there. But now San Fernando East might, yes, they had someone in between, obviously, but now it might have to find, ironically, similar to how we need to, the future after oil and gas, now might be the real time when it's like, all right, what is the future for San Fernando East after Patrick Manning? We're still clinging on to the legacy through his son, but if he's removed, now what's going to happen? And this is something that has been so crazy. Even Mrs. Manning came out to say, I am willing to take up the chairmanship of San Fernando East. Because again, I don't necessarily know who is in the right and the wrong between the constituency executive and the MP. One of the deputy political leaders has come out to say that there's no evidence produced to support corruption. One of the issues they have with Brian Manning is the fact that he's saying these things happen. And when asked what is the evidence, I think he said something along the lines of, well, it's in the papers. But as was pointed out by deputy political leader, deputy political leader Sanjeev Budu, but the newspaper clipping was not even produced. It's not their job to find your evidence. You make a claim that there's corruption here, then you say the evidence is in the papers. Where is it? It's your job to find it. You can't just point us to a public source, point us in the direction of a public source. It's somewhere over so. That's not good enough. I don't have any issue with Mr. Manning personally. And I was ready to support him if he was in the right. I don't have any bias against him. But the fact that this thing accelerated to the point where the party executive basically has to chastise him in the manner that they are. And they might be forced to go further. As I said, now he's an MP, so they can't remove him from being an MP, but this might be the end. This might be the last term. And it's sad, really, because the legacy of his father is in his hands, and unfortunately, whether he is right or wrong, how it has been handled. This is the thing, and this is what I criticize the government a lot of. It's not necessarily the decisions that you make, it's how you implement it, how you communicate it, what you say and how you say it. Not necessarily the stance you want to take, the decision you want to take. You want to fight the battle, fine. How you fight the battle. That's just as important, sometimes even more so. And if you don't understand that, and to be fair, a lot of politicians seemingly don't, but if you are directly showing an inability to understand that, then I don't know if you're fit for purpose. I don't know why, but it seems as though people think, being a politician is easy. No, it's not that it's easy. It's that we are far too accustomed to letting people collect a check and not work. We know it happens in the public sector. Not the entire public sector, but it happens. We know it happens in government. We know it happens in parliament. When Dr. Raleigh was elected Prime Minister, the PNM was elected way back in 2015 or so. At some point, almost every minister stopped talking. And then, for the life of talking point, there were many ministers, you would forget they're ministers. And you see the same phenomenon happening now with the UNC. We have a Minister of Justice. I keep forgetting that he exists. There were times when I forget, oh wait, Anna Roberts is a minister in the Ministry of Housing. He's just one of two ministers in the Ministry of Housing, who does have a line minister, so it's three of them in one ministry. They have ministers of other ministries, I don't even know who they are. The Minister of Tourism, I think, is just one of those things that people regularly forget, no matter who's in charge. So I don't know if he thought being an MP would be easy. Unfortunately, he doesn't have the experience because he came in from the outside. He was not in politics when his father was in politics, from what I understand. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. Having the real world skills and abilities to actually do things, to know how things are made, to know how businesses work. These are all good skills to have. I mean, one would say a lot of the politicians are lawyers. They don't really display great command of legal knowledge and subject matter. So, but when you do not necessarily have political experience, you need, journalists might make better politicians than most other fields. Because a good journalist, as was said to me by then Newsday editor Judy Raymond, editor-in-chief, you need to have a certain degree of instant curiosity. Because you never know when you're going to be put in a position where you have an assignment on a subject matter that you might know nothing about and you need to learn quick. But not just learn quick. Be able to have a level of enthusiasm for the subject matter, some genuine desire to learn and internalize so that you could connect. And by connecting with the topic, you could then connect with the interview subject. And not just seem as though this is, I'm just here to kind of lazily ask if I have no idea what's going on. You know, I don't know what I'm talking about. No, you want to avoid that at all costs. And the thing is, that kind of mindset, then when you go and become an MP and you're in Parliament and you're dealing with legislations that deal with a whole host of subject matters from national security, gambling, business regulation, health regulation, education, yeah, you're able to dive right in. You're able to learn quick. You understand that there are things that you don't know, and you're more accurate in your assessment of yourself to figure out what it is you don't know. You know better than most what it is you don't know. Too many people don't know what they don't know. Don't know that they don't know. And by understanding your deficiencies, you're better able to find the right help to either compensate for it or help you develop the knowledge base or the skills that you need in the long run for whatever it is you're undertaking. And in politics, it will be varied and it'll be many different things, and it'll be potentially fast-paced depending on the demands of the moment. But we have too many substitute teachers. Now, I'm not saying Mr. Manning, Brian Manning, was a substitute teacher. But it seems as though there were perhaps certain lessons he did not learn quick enough. And one of those things is, why is it you're now out and about to the media publicly airing dirty laundry, but you're not necessarily making effective claims? You're not necessarily giving complete arguments. You're not necessarily doing a good job to lay the foundation for your position, your reasoning, your logic, to convince people that you're right. Which is why I was wondering if he himself was trying to make a play for leadership at one point. Because what he was doing didn't necessarily make much sense to me. And that goes back to my wider fear for the PNM. And this matters to everybody, including UNC supporters, because if the opposition is weak, the government will be left unchecked. And a PNM government left unchecked, you have to wait until 2025 to vote them out. And suffer until then, basically. You think that can't happen here because your team is in charge and they're just magically better than? Good luck with that. Basic human nature. If there is nothing to limit me, what is to stop me from acting with excess? Basic human psychology. When the cat's away, the mice will play. So my concern is this is a sign that the PNM, instead of working towards stability and re-legitimizing itself, re-establishing trust and confidence in the minds of the public, by doing so, they become a more credible threat to the government. By becoming a more credible threat to the government, it incentivizes the government to do better. No, instead of that, what we have is, ironically, I suspect the PNM were looking past the UNC, only now to have this stumbling block, which could then allow the UNC to look past the PNM. Well, they ain't going to win the next election. They can't even get their act together now. They can't even prevent an MP from arguing with a constituency executive, publicly making a mess of the whole thing. They're going to win the next election? And again, when the cat's away, the mice will play. That will then incentivize the government to feel as though we will automatically win, so we could do whatever we want. We could challenge the Auditor General. We could kidnap someone from Barbados. We could arrest the sitting Commissioner of Police and don't even have charges that we could offer to the public. We could do all of these kind of things. I mean, the way how these state agencies are going, they definitely could do things similar to what the PNM did. And the PNM did it because at some point they thought, we can't lose the next election. What are we worried about? We can do whatever we want. See how well that worked out for them? You think that the current government is immune to that mental trap of its own making? Because it'll be of your own making. No one is going to entrap you with that. You make the trap yourself. You start to believe that you will win no matter what. So you can do whatever you want. And then things get so bad, you definitely are not going to win. This whole thing, part of what annoys me is how unnecessary it is. You have an issue within your party. Why are you fighting it publicly? And again, it's not about covering things up. Going public turns things into a circus, makes things messy. Regardless of what the issue is, you don't do it all the time willy-nilly. I don't know if our politicians think that's a first choice option. It's not supposed to be. So, I think it's unfortunate. I didn't necessarily dislike Mr. Brian Manning. I didn't necessarily have supreme confidence in him, but I was willing to say, let's see how this works. But we'll never know now. We'll never know now. And more importantly, it has, I think, at the end of the day, harmed his father's legacy. Because that's the problem. When you seemingly get in based mostly on the weight of your last name, then anything you do that might be perceived to be negative will affect that last name. And I know Karen thinks very highly of Mr. Manning. I have an appreciation for Mr. Manning. And that appreciation is not born from any kind of kickback or business or nothing like that. It is all simple human interactions. That's it. That's it. I did not enjoy benefits and perks under a Manning regime, just so you know. He was the prime minister. There were times that I met him. There were basic interactions. He didn't offer me anything. I didn't ask of him of anything. That was all. And I appreciated that down-to-earth way of being. So, I don't necessarily like anything that's going to unnecessarily harm his last name, but it is what it is. I can't cover it up. I can't say, it's fine. it is what it is. And I don't necessarily think, again, Brian Manning has ill intentions. At least that's what's been told to me. But the result is not good. So, where do things move on from here? The UNC's shadow MP is now offering himself up again. One thing he needs to understand is that this is a marathon. He has to wait all the way till the next election. It's an MP. You can't get rid of an MP. He's elected, right? Will Mr. Manning end up being a backbencher? Will he be able to rehabilitate? It might not be over. He might be able to find a way out of this. And who knows, depending on how that's managed, how the party manages it, how he manages it, it might end up being a positive. But I don't know. I'm not accustomed to seeing that level of success in terms of crisis management in Trinidad and Tobago on the whole. So we have to wait and see. But this does give the government a reprieve. And that's essentially all the government is asking for. Please look somewhere else. Do not look at what we're doing right now. We have a remoney line. Caller, good morning. You're on the air.
Well, good morning to you and Talking Point Nation.
Morning.
Now, the ironic part about this, right? When you listen to the narrative, as I just call it, is the fact that if we do a survey of all 41 constituencies and find out who are the MPs that do it, let me say 70% of the time, they walk about, they talk with the constituents, they find out what they need, and you would find out of the 41, you might get 11. And what has happened, sometimes when you're in government, these ministers would leave the constituency executive on their own to do as they please. Everybody feeding at the trough. Now you're out of power. And you have to try to get back your leg. It will be very hard. So when the gentleman is saying, well, you have people in the executive, when they came in, they didn't have anything, and now they are millionaires. That is for all 41 MPs, as well as senators, people who are appointed to boards and the like. This thing in our country where every creed and race find an equal place, that's just words, you know. We don't really practice that. But good program as usual. And what I would like to see going forward, because when I hear people talk about the roads not being fixed, the potholes, the rubbish, problems with land, flooding, what the MPs doing? You know, someone tell you, well, you have to check the councillor. You have to check the councillor, you tell you, well, we have no funds for that. So you still have to perpetually suffer, and these people living high off the fat of the land. Those days are over. You have been elected to do a job, you have to start to do your job. Yeah, dot your I's, cross your T's, and show the people who you're representing that, hey, yeah, I am representing you, and I am not representing the party. Same story, and as you just say, nothing to see here, let's move along. Have a good day, short night as well. Good program as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The thing, here's the thing, you said those days are over, living off the fat of the land. I have said that we can't afford the corruption. But the unfortunate reality is the corruption could still exist. History has shown that there have been instances where leaders still steal money from treasuries that cannot afford to be stolen from, and the people will suffer even more. You don't have to be a rich country for politicians to steal. You could be a poor country for politicians to steal. So nothing has changed to really say why they can't steal. They'll take what's there. They'll take what they think they could get away with. I mean, that's what we assume is happening all now anyway. We have another caller from Marima on the phone. Caller, good morning, you're on here.
Morning, Sean.
Morning.
No, I want to say something about that. You see, Mr. Manning, you know, he was a simple man, right? Now you're seeing the politician and them, they come in the politics, and within 6 or 7 months, they have big mansion, right? They have big mansion already. They come with simple nothing. And in 6 or 7 months, it's big mansion, big apartments they have. You understand? Whereas Mr. Manning was so simple thing. Look how Mr. Manning died. Just a simple person, a simple man with nothing. You understand? But not now. Now the politician and them different. Some of them greedy. Don't care about nobody, only their self. You understand? So that is what I think about the politics. So Mr. Manning, he was like a statesman. He was a nice person. So you see now, everybody in his constituency, right? They have respect for him because he was a respectable person. No, you don't get that. You don't get that with some of them. They are different. They are different now. That is all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. Yeah, people might not appreciate this, but my father points it out all the time. Well, what did he have when he left? Because maybe Lisa Morris Julian, I don't know the living conditions and standards and vehicles of all politicians, but from what I've seen, there's him and Lisa Morris Julian, where their lives seem rather mundane. Rather mundane. I remember seeing his other son driving around. You know, he was kind of around. And it wasn't, again, it was some normal, everyday car that a normal middle-class person would drive. So that's one of the things that then you look at, right? Like, whether some people might think, what do you mean? You think he didn't enrich himself? Well, at the very least, you can't say he did it to the level that others did it, because I don't think there's enough evidence to suggest that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, right? I believe Brian Manning had legitimate careers before entering into politics. So we can't judge his lifestyle based on things like that, to be fair to him as well. But the caller is correct. There are a lot of people where it seems as though they live a very comfortable lifestyle, far more comfortable than the rest of us. And in a lot of cases, their careers before politics weren't anything to speak about. So one of the things, though, Mr. Rima, that you bring up, I have an issue with, is a misunderstanding of the core responsibilities or the responsibilities of an MP. Now, yes, if you have a problem in your constituency, you should be able to speak to your MP. Technically, they can't solve the problem directly. It is lazy to say, you gotta speak to the council about that. It is lazy. What they should say, yes, they should say, did you contact the local government body, the regional corporation, right? Did you contact your councillor? To know whether or not that the local government body is aware of the situation or not. You don't want to be redundant. But then, for the most part, the MP has to be ready if the situation is not being addressed. A constituent is speaking to you. I would think that some effort could be made to look into it. But then the public needs to understand they can't solve the problem, right? They don't have direct control over any resources. Ministers do, that is ministry resources, right? So local government bodies are the ones that have direct control over the resources to deal with that. And you don't necessarily want a situation where they are subservient to MPs. But MPs should have a level of influence insofar that they are supposed to be connected to their constituents. And therein lies the problem. We allow them to get away with not representing the people, because we think their job is to make sure the roads are paved and the bridges are fixed. That's not their job. Their job is, if the local government body doesn't have enough resources, they go to Parliament and bring it up there. They could go to Cabinet and bring up the need for resources being allocated there. Because as an MP, I am connected to my constituents. I know what's going on the ground within my constituency. So I could then represent my people. Because that is their most important job, to represent. And the most important area that they represent is in Parliament, when debating legislature. To voice the concerns of the local voters in Parliament. If I am the MP of Mayaro, I am there to represent the people of Mayaro. I am not there to talk about the people on Toko need, the people from Diego Martin North need. I am there to represent my constituents. But we allow them to not do that, because they don't represent you when debating legislature. They represent the logo on their chest. That is the practice in Parliament. So then now, we let them get away with that because we think they are there to pave roads and to build bridges. And sometimes they fool you when they go for the photo opportunity. Look at what I did in the constituency. No, it's a local government function. That's why local government is important, because local government controls that budget. And you don't want the MP dictating things to local government, because that's not their job. But they can represent, they can ensure that the constituency gets the resources it needs. But by allowing our mindset of what we think their responsibilities are, it allows them to abandon their true responsibilities. Because when things like an SOE comes up, they're not necessarily speaking on to what are the needs and wants of the people of their constituencies. They're speaking to the needs and wants of their party. San Fernando line, caller, good morning, you're here.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
I would like you touched on something this morning there, which I think is a direction that we need to go into a little more. This issue of diversification. We read to start to get into the diversification, because if it is and then the banding it wrong, but nobody is really getting down to it as the politicians. So we need to do that ourselves. Focus on the diversification, focus on a couple of things that we think the direction the country should go in terms of diversification, and can I get down into it. I would appreciate if you would think about doing that someday. Now, that issue in San Fernando, Mr. Man, Patrick Augustus Moving Man left a big situation.
Mr. Samana, you're breaking up badly. I'm very much tempted to ask you to call back and hopefully have a better connection. Can you hear me? Guys, I think we need to cut the call. Mr. Fernando, if you can hear me, call back. Yeah, call back, because the connection was really bad. I really couldn't make out most of what you were saying, particularly at the end there. It seemed it went fully silent. So call back. Hopefully that will be a more stable connection if you call back. I don't know what it is. Like, one of the few times you have phone troubles is now when it's in San Fernando. With regards to diversification, I guess part of it is you really need the economists to speak to the potential pathways. Food security is an obvious one, but I don't know if it's enough. San Fernando, back on the line. Caller, good morning. You're on the air.
Hello.
Morning. Oh, boy. Whew. Not good, not good. I don't know if you have a different phone you could try. I don't know if are you on a cell phone in a different area than normal, a cordless phone? Try a landline if you have one. Because as you connected, I basically heard the hello and then nothing else. All right. Yeah, so I think one of the basic temptations would be to also look at food security alongside diversification. But I think one of the things is it's to try to find what we could export. The problem with food security is I don't know to what degree we could export it. The whole idea with food security is we want to produce food for ourselves. So that's going to cut into any sort of production levels. And also to compete food production with all of the foreign sources of food manufacturing. That might be difficult. Now, maybe, again, as I've always said, CARICOM could be like a pseudo economies of scale single market, right? Where you treat it kind of like pseudo-domestic or singular domestic market. Yes, I know there's the CSME and all of that, but I don't know if we really look at it to then try to leverage it for economies of scale, because that's the problem. And leverage the geographical short distances that would, in theory, make the distribution cost less, and use that to compete with by trading more, even more with each other than importing food from further ports. But those situations have much bigger economies of scale, both of manufacturing as well as the distribution channels with the size of the ships potentially, et cetera, et cetera. So the real thing is, what else could we look at for export earnings? Will financial services be enough? I don't know. I really don't know how that works. Singapore did it. I believe Iceland, not Iceland. Is it Iceland or Ireland? One of them, I think, might have also done similar, right? Can it be done here? I don't know if we could make an international financial center, but is our financial institutions, regulatory framework, government, are they all ready for that responsibility, right? Do we have the financial crimes, whatever financial crimes unit is named, are they ready for that level of responsibility? Because now, if you want to be a hub for anything, you have to be secure in what you're doing, right? So, yeah, I really wouldn't know where to begin with regards to what could be the real cash crop good or service to earn foreign exchange. We have to earn foreign exchange. Especially if, now, do we have enough literal space, land, to get food security with food manufacturing and maybe have an industry on something else for export? Maybe it might have to be, for the sake of efficiency, just all agricultural products. Otherwise, it might be the case where we just move away from actual food security and we then make a push for an export industry that will allow us to continue to afford importing food, which might be more efficient. It might be more efficient to do it that way, but it still comes with the risk of, if anything is interrupted on the import side of the equation, we'll have issues, right? But I don't know if we are able to set up and grow both agriculture and something else. And I don't know if agriculture alone could give us the export revenue, foreign exchange earnings that we need to get out of the situation. Because as was pointed out in an informal discussion I had yesterday, you know, what's being done for Forex? But in my mind, I'm like, that is a very tough nut to crack, to be honest. That's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of sacrifice to course correct the country's economy, to find what is the thing after oil, because that is basically how oil fueled the economy, the foreign exchange. That's how it fueled the economy. That's why the vast majority of new businesses is, as we've discussed on the show before, import to retail, which is not sustainable because you're using foreign exchange dollars to buy your stock to earn TT dollars. So how do you continue to buy your stock? Someone has to earn the foreign exchange. And let me reiterate this point again. We could switch and use US dollars as our domestic currency to bypass the foreign exchange, but that's not actually going to solve the problem because it's really a balance of trade problem. The foreign exchange shortage or the foreign exchange rate is merely a way to measure or determine the balance of trade problem or to indicate the balance of trade problem. Because the reason why there's a foreign exchange shortfall is we spend more foreign exchange than we earn, so there's an issue, or at least we might not spend literally more than we earn, but the demand is more than we earn. And if we just use US dollars to do everything, what will happen is instead of having a foreign exchange shortfall, we'll have our money going out and not enough coming in. And like any business where cost is greater than revenue, you're going to go defunct. I don't know if Mr. Sampan, maybe you could call in tomorrow if things aren't working out today. We have a remoney line. We do have some comments to get to as well, but we'll take a remote call. Good morning, you're here.
Just one morning again.
Morning.
Listening to talking about agriculture, and I just wanted to put this in perspective, right? When last year passed by the jail in Golden Grove, especially on the highway side, to see this big forest that is there. What I'm saying is this. It is my view. People might go against it. But if the prisoners are used to clean up the area, and the government creates some kind of farm and employ these fellows on them while they're serving the time, so that they become productive members of the society, at the end of the day, it could be used to feed the barracks, the hospitals, schooling, and all the youth camp centers, like Mylat and others, and CCC. Get that out there. And the equation is this. In business, profit is equal to revenue minus cost. When you have food security on that scale, you could be saving money and they could put to better use elsewhere. But as I told you before, the ideas we have, we document it and sell it. San Fernando's ideas about egg production. That's a serious, that has jobs, it has money to be made here, because what we have our money spent in Trinidad, everybody will be able to live. But what has happened? Those who make the money, they pull aside, and that money coming out of the system. So there's more people fighting for a smaller pot all the time. Have a good day. Thanks, Scholar. One of the things with agriculture is I don't know. I suspect it's not as though if we achieve food security, it will be in the form of, well, we'll have cows and pigs and chickens, and we'll have cabbage and cauliflower and broccoli and lettuce, and we can't grow everything. We can't grow all the peas and all the vegetables and rice and potatoes and sweet potatoes and cassava and all the provisions and all the meats. I don't think we could do all, because we want to have operations at a certain scale. It'll be more efficient, it'll be more cost effective, right? Obviously, chicken production, we probably could scale that up a bit more, right? If there was someone willing to invest. Part of it is you need the private sector to be involved, because government cannot do the actual investment and creating. They need to get the framework, the environment to be conducive for business, which they are not. Both, all, right? And then what the government can potentially do is say, all right, this is what we're going to do. Chickens, let's make sure that we're solid with that. We have a local manufacturing base. How do we improve it? What do we do so that we make the inputs? We don't just import the eggs to then be the chickens, right? We control the whole chain of production from the very beginning. We do it here. How do we do that? How do we scale it up so that we can ensure that we have all the chicken, all the fresh chicken we need, and that we don't have to every year, somewhere in the middle of the year,
have a shortage that then causes prices to go up, and for about a few weeks, you're eating pigeons, not chickens, because they're slaughtering them too quickly. How do we do that? And then now, what other meat could we do? So there's a little bit of diversity, because part of food security is what happens if there's some kind of disease or sickness or whatever in the industry, right? Remember mad cow disease, or when they have whatever disease with bananas. Right now, one of the concerns is just the wrong biological disaster could potentially wipe out a significant chunk of banana production in the world because they're clones of each other, so they all have the same vulnerabilities, genetically speaking. So you don't necessarily want to get caught now where there's some. Now, if we do control the full chain of production, then we might be insulated from anything that goes wrong with chicken production globally, right? But still, also food security for good human health, I believe, diversity of ingredients, of proteins, of carbs, of vegetables is important. So you don't want to necessarily just say, all we are producing is cabbage and chickens and rice. And therefore, push come to shove, we will just eat cabbage and chicken and rice, cabbage and chicken and rice. Now, we could go back to what I said. We could go back and say, well, we're producing things to sell and then use the earnings, so we just overdo it on the limited produce, the one meat, the one veg, the one starch. Even if maybe at that point we don't even make a starch, but we just overdo it on that, sell the excess if it is marketable, use the profits to then give us the diversity of food products for proper balanced nutrition. That's one way to do it. You need someone in leadership to figure out, okay, what is the philosophy that the agricultural sector is going to operate with? Are we going to try to get how many crops? What is the scale? How far down the line? Right? What is the philosophy? Is food security the priority? Is export the priority? These are the kind of things that government through the ministries should be setting up, because then you'll set up the infrastructure to allow these things to happen. And then when private enterprise sees the government being serious about something, this is an important initiative that's not going to be mired with corruption and theft. And in part, you want food security, you need to deal with predial larceny. There's a story about, I didn't read it, but I believe there's a story about that in today's papers, right? Now, with regards to the prisons, I'll say this. I don't think necessarily you're going to get the scale that you think, because yes, in modern farming, you don't need that level of manpower in most cases, right? Yes, in harvest season for certain fruits and stuff, it's labor intensive. I don't think, first of all, we should do labor intensive crop here in TNT unless our economy bottoms out and you have that many people looking for that type of job, right? Maybe we do have enough people. We have migrants. The migrants might be willing to do the work for, even if it's for a limited time, and maybe we cycle them through like what they do in North America, right? But with regards to prisoners, I don't know if we could just put them in labor-intensive agriculture scenarios. That's not going to scale very well. The flip side is this. Certain crops scale well because it's automated, in the sense of you'll have like a lot of various heavy equipment, heavy vehicles to do the field work, right? I don't know if a farm being run by prisoners could invest that level of capital, at least initially. So I don't know how well you could scale up food production with prisoners, because the other thing is this, you need to have them in a controlled environment where it's difficult for them to escape and make mischief. So you can't just willy-nilly have fields upon fields upon fields and then try to fence that. Maybe you can, maybe you can. But there is merit in what you're saying in two ways. One, you do achieve some level of food production. However, it is practical to scale it to. I don't know what the limit is. I'm just saying I won't be surprised if they have limits. So it can't necessarily solve all the problems, but it's still food production. More importantly, not only does it give the prisoner something productive to do while being incarcerated, and here's the thing, I don't think you could put men on remand to do this, right? So as was pointed out, the number of prisoners available might not actually be that large. A lot of people in Golden Grove are on remand. A lot of people that they took from Building 13 and sent to the barracks, right, in Chagaramas, from what I understand, they were on remand. That's why they were being treated so well. That's why they had so much access to external communication, because they weren't actually convicted yet. Now, the fact is, though, or the point is, for the convicted prisoners, it gives them something constructive to do now, and it teaches them a skill, which they could then, once they are not enamored with the easy life and they are properly rehabilitated, then they could not only practice that skill in the outside world, but pass on those skills on some level, right? But it's not just the skills, because we have programs in prisons that do rehabilitate prisoners. And when they work, they really work. And part of it is not just giving a prisoner a skill, but also, and it's not going to happen for all of them, but even if it happens for 1%, that's still a win. It imparts on them a different mindset, a different way of life. Whatever the skill is, that's cool, yes, but it's also just the sheer fact that it's a different way of life. And that is also something they can pass on, because every success story we have with regards to rehabilitating a prisoner does more for rehabilitating future prisoners than any dog and pony show a politician might do in front of a camera. Because then people follow real. People identify with real. And someone that really did it is so much more powerful than trying to tell them you can do it. Well, he did it. So he proved it can be done. And if he could do it, you could do it. So now when I say you can do it, the system worked for him. Everything worked out for him. It's things like that that we need to deal with the crime problem, which is why I say a lot of these things are interconnected. And when you have weaknesses in one area, you will see the consequences of that scattered throughout society, scattered in other areas of the economy. Let's take the comments quick before we go. All right, good morning, Sean. Wow, Mrs. Manning have to put down her walking stick and her walker to come back in politics, out with the new and in with the old. How void is the PNM? Or is it mommy coming to change the pamper of her son? Tell me now, thanks. I mean, I can't fault you for the interpretation. I can't. This is to show how bad it does look and what a misstep Brian Manning took. Now, I don't necessarily think that she's going, the party executive is going to entertain bringing her back in that capacity. They might have, if Brian Manning handled it better. They may yet still, but now, to some extent, any capacity for Brian Manning to continue a career in politics as MP of San Fernando East is highly dependent on, is there any truth in his accusations? Was the constituency executive doing anything wrong? And I don't know. I don't know for sure how that's going to play out. But he's going to need something there to at least partially justify what he did. He can't fully justify it. He can't fully justify it. Because the comment is pointing out, that is how it looks. That's how it looks. There's no way around that. So he can't fully justify that. He can't fully justify making the party look bad unnecessarily to accomplish little to nothing. But what he might be able to do is the party and him figure out a way to move forward so that even though it looks bad now, the long-term impact is limited, is minimized. And you can turn negatives into positive because, and this is something politicians do not understand, so I do not expect this to happen, but I'm still going to say it. I hope it can happen, and I hope it can happen not just this time, but many times, both in the PNM and in the UNC. You make a mistake. If you repeatedly make a mistake, there's no coming back from that. But when you make a mistake, when you make a genuine mistake, when you make a mistake for the first time, how you treat with that could be a display on how you deal properly with mistakes, of how you can right the ship, of how effectively you can manage the crisis. Responsibly, transparently, intelligently, as opposed to being a smart man and trying to weasel your way out of the negative consequences. You do that, you're done. The PNM does that in this case, they're done. Or at least they're not done. They already got voted out. They will set themselves back significantly. Let's take the next comment. Morning. When I have infighting in the UNC, the PNM and their supporters have a field day. Guess what? We're having a field day on what is going on in the PNM as well. Exactly what the government is saying about the CPEP and URP program. Mr. Manning is saying from within the PNM. Thanks. Well, unless T is the name. Again, no one, I never disputed the fact that CPEP needed to be fixed. I just had an issue with the how. As I said, it's not the policy decisions, it's the how you do it. It's the what you say. Now, yes, have a field day. Have a field day. If you're a UNC supporter, I cannot fault you for having a field day. That's the point. But in the long run, understand, this does not strengthen your party, it weakens it. This does not strengthen the UNC, it weakens the UNC. Because it will allow for a degree of complacency. Because when your opponents are weak, you are not going to be strong. You are going to be weak. When the league is weak, there are no strong teams. Our football league is weak. We don't have this one team that is magically strong that could go and challenge all other football clubs in the region and win whatever the Western Hemisphere, America's Cup, whatever it is. We don't have that. We don't see all of the teams are weak, but we have this one team and the players are regularly recruited to go to the English Premier League. We don't have that. We've had a few. We've had some famous examples. We know we could do it, but the league is weak. This is the thing. Dwight York proves that local football players have the physical abilities, at least in theory, to go play football abroad, right? In theory. It proves we have the physical talent to play sports. And the fact that we have gold medalists also proves locally we have the physical talent to play sports on foreign soil, international grounds, whatever, right? International levels of play. So why don't we have more footballers being recruited from Trinidad and Tobago? It's because the competition is weak. And because the competition locally is weak, the development of the players are weak. So, do not necessarily take a victory lap over this. Don't. Because there is that. There is the fact that it will allow complacency to set in on the UNC if it hasn't done so already. Because to be fair, the opposition has not necessarily looked strong. At any point in time they have been in office, they have not looked that strong. They've looked better in recent days, but now they have set themselves back. It is what it is. How unfortunate for them. I shed no tears. It's a them problem. They have to figure it out. If they want to be a viable alternative for government, they have to figure it out. But don't take a victory lap. Not only can complacency set in, but at the end of the day, in the long run, if you are concerned only about the UNC, if that's where your allegiances lie, I disagree with you, but I'm not going to necessarily go into that right now. If you are concerned with Trinidad and Tobago, you can't play this zero-sum game. Because for your side to win, their side has to lose. But why do you assume the country will win? That is not how a democracy works. That is what we make a democracy into. But that's not supposed to be how it works. Because if that is the mindset that we have, we will never be a unified country. If that is how we go first. And it doesn't matter if the other side is doing the same thing, or is not reciprocating, or is also divisive. You cannot blame the other side for doing something, and you cannot put all the blame on them if you are doing similar enough things. If they are not doing their part, and you're doing your part, then guess what? All the blame falls on them. It's one of the things with the crime talks that I never understood. It doesn't matter if you think the other side will never go for it. You, whether you're the PNM or the UNC, should have shown every conceivable effort, regardless of how futile it is, right? That you wanted the crime talks to succeed, that you wanted to pull it off. And when the other side, whoever it is, didn't show, then you could go to the Belgian side, look, we did everything we could. We did everything we reasonably could, and then we went beyond reason and did everything we could. And they refused to come to the table. And then you come out looking like a hero, and they come out looking like a villain. But that's not what we saw. What we saw was complacency. They're not going to do it, so why am I going to put any effort? Dog and pony show lip service. And then you have two sides basically saying, well, they didn't want to do it. But what they're not saying is, well, they didn't want to do it, so I didn't want to do it either. Because I really want to work with them. Because I really can't work with them. Because they don't want to work with me. It's really because they don't want to work with me. But you're not putting out the effort. You're not putting out the effort to work with them. Even if they hate your guts, you put out the effort because it's not about you. It's about the nation. But we didn't see that. We never see that. We never see one side saying, it's about the nation. I am going to prove through my deeds, not just lip service, that I am doing everything I can to come to a bilateral table to solve important national issues. We do not see that. And this mindset supports that, reinforces that, promotes that, pushes that for our side to win, their side has to lose, which means if that is the operating philosophy of politics in this country, let me give you an inconvenient truth. Everybody who operates like that, that says that they believe in TNT, that they put country first, that they are trying to do the best for the nation, that they are trying to do the best for all peoples, they are lying. It is an outright lie. One cannot serve two masters. If the party is your priority, then the nation is not. It's that simple. That's what priority means. That's what priority means. Good for the party and good for the nation very rarely intersects. It does intersect at times, yes, but that's not how it works. Because good for the party is to look at things as a zero-sum game. For us to win, you have to lose. So we make sure that we do everything we can that you lose and that we win. But here's the sad reality. When a political party wins, a political party wins. When UNC wins, everybody wins, ultimately is shown to be untrue. In part because we have not seen them actually engage in any meaningful way to ensure that happens. Because the reality is, when the UNC wins, the UNC wins. When the PNM wins, the PNM wins. And if you're not a political diehard that is quick to prove your political loyalties, you will never win. You're in the middle, you will never win. You're uncommitted, you'll never win. You're a moderate voter, you'll never win. You will never win because you will never be a priority, because the priority is not the country, the priority is the party. If you want to live that way in perpetuity, do not cry crocodile tears because you're not going to win all the time. Don't complain to me when you want to say, well, look what the PNM is doing. Yes, they're doing it because you're doing it back. They did it to you, you do it back to them, they'll continue doing it to you. So, this is why I say remember your allegiance to the country above all political allegiances or loyalties. This is why I say what I say. Remember your allegiance to the country and to each other And it includes people on the other side, because we are all supposed to be Trimbagonians. That's what everybody wins means. Unfortunately, some people forget that when it's convenient on both sides of the aisle. That's why I also then say it's nice to be nice. Because at the very least, if we don't fully understand what it takes to be Trimbagonians first, we could at least have basic decorum to prevent us from descending into madness, which doesn't always happen. And that's why I end with a hope that we will see each other tomorrow, when I know that at the end of the day, there will be tragedy in the papers tomorrow. But a man can hope, can't he? Bye-bye.
WESN.
Good day and welcome to this week's episode of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. I am your host, Rondell Donowa, and once again, I am happy to bring the law and you. Of course, you can stream us on the World Wide Web at wesncc.com as well as all social media platforms. So today we have a topic that is often underlooked, and it's called environmental law, the effectiveness of environmental laws in Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, you know, we do have legislation, we do have a body. However, is it sufficient? Do we know that climate change is something that is real, global warming is real? And how well are we dealing with sustainable development? Now, I have a guest in studio this morning. Her name is Mrs. Giselle Lando Birmingham, and she's a private practitioner. She's an attorney at law, of course, having been admitted to the bar over 10 years ago. Giselle holds a Master of Business Administration in Sustainable Energy Management with distinction from the Arthur Lockjack Graduate School of Business. And she is an adjunct lecturer for climate change issues and environmental impact assessments for energy projects at the Arthur Lockjack. Now, Giselle is a scholarship recipient and has worked at the Office of Director of Public Prosecutions, Legal Aid and Advisory Authority, and the Environmental Management Authority as Corporate Secretary Legal Officer 3. Giselle is also from South, and she is a colleague of mine. So I say good morning, Giselle.
Good morning, Mr. Donowa. Thank you so much for having me this morning.
You could call me Rondell, of course.
Hi, Rondell.
How are you this morning?
I'm great, I'm great.
Right,
Thank you so much.
So, I mean, you're a private practitioner. You have extensive knowledge in environmental law, as well as you have been past corporate secretary of the EMA.
Yes.
So I believe you are noteworthy and you are qualified to speak on this issue. Now, a lot of people ask, what is environmental law in its simple terms?
Yeah. Rondell, I like this quote. Albert Einstein said that the environment is anything that isn't me. So environmental law is basically that body of law that deals with everything in terms of natural resources, conservation, anything literally that isn't you, the natural environment. That is what environmental law is designed to tackle. Now, environmental law is not simply domestic law. Environmental law, a lot of it is made at the international level through multilateral environmental agreements, and then that has to be incorporated into domestic law. So it happens both at the international level as well as the domestic level. and that is essentially dealing with all aspects of the environment.
Now, are we signed on to any charter in terms of environmental policies?
We're signed on to a number of multilateral environmental agreements and conventions. For example, if we are dealing with climate change, we have signed on to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. We've signed on to the Paris Agreement, Kyoto Protocol, all of those things, in addition to which there's, I believe, over 200 international conventions which deal with environmental law, and we're signatory to many of those.
And in terms of our legal framework in Trinidad and Tobago,